Hi, everything.
Sarah, now I'm looking at some of the stories here. A former Chernobyl liquidator living in Cork fought back tears as he described how the nuclear disaster still haunts him 37 years to the day. I mean, when we look at Chernobyl, they've only recently actually opened the area up again, the area of Chernobyl. So it's taken that long to clear the radiation from the area. What a tragic event that was.
Yes, and last week marked a very important anniversary of that tragedy, which rocked the world 37 years ago. Imagine it was 37 years ago.
Doesn't seem like that. I must show how old I am. I remember it happening. So I remember watching it on the news.
Yeah. My mum was pregnant at the time with me, so.
Oh, right, okay. That makes me. By the way, that just makes me feel a lot older now. Right?
Yeah, no, that was my way of one-upping you. I think I one-upped you, did I?
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
So anyway, let's never forget the Chernobyl disaster or the Chernobyl liquidators, which included Ukraine's military police. They were called to the scene to form part of decontamination efforts on the day of that infamous explosion. So I was lucky enough to meet one of those liquidators, and they're living in Cork. This is a man named Igor. So I got this meeting was thanks to the help of Fiona Corcoran from local charity, the Greater Chernobyl Cause. She recently helped Igor, his wife Olga, and their cat Richard flee another disaster, the war in Ukraine, after hearing about his crippling health issues linked to radiation. So this is an absolutely lovely man. So I'm sure supporters of this charity will be so glad to see where their money is going. And he was so open. We spoke with the help of a translator, and he told me all about the myriad of health problems he suffers from as a result of the migration, or as a result of the radiation, even today. So he suffers from very severe migraines and a blood disorder, and he's constantly back and forth from hospital, but has an amazing attitude. And what struck me with this story was the light that shone through the cracks, you might say. So he described his only son, 33-year-old Anatoly, and what a miracle he is. So it was he really is a miracle, because Igor was told after this incident that he would never be able to have children, that him and his wife Olga would never be blessed.
That's right, yes. So many men became impotent after that because of the radiation poisoning, and it essentially sterilised a lot of people, both women and men.
Yeah. So he described one of those few happy moments he experienced, and he said, hearing I was going to have a son was like flying to the highest point of the sky without wings, and it was the most happiness I've ever had in one day, he told me. I knew my son would be so strong and look like his mum, the best woman on the planet. So he said he's a miracle. And he spoke of the other men who that day who weren't as lucky as him, who weren't able to go on and have children. Some of them didn't even survive. So that was his message. He was telling us to never forget, because the radiation doesn't kill you straight away. It takes time.
Yeah.
And many who were there with him that day are still also suffering from really severe health problems. And the government basically lied to them. So he's still very angry about that, but not bitter at all. And there was so much hope there, and he's so looking forward to the future. He's 55, even though you can see that the radiation has ravaged him. He looks quite a bit older, but he told me about some of his hopes. He told me that he has a grandson who he absolutely dotes on, and his dream now is to stay in Cork because he's fallen in love with Cork, and no pressure for his son, but he said he really, really wants to have a granddaughter. So it's just an absolutely lovely couple. I actually had to bring my little girl along with me because I was off that day and I'd only heard about him.
Sounds like a lovely story. I know it's a lovely story that comes out of a tragedy, absolutely. But in other news, a 10-year-old girl has marked her 100th missed day of school after being sent home some months ago for reasons out of her family's control. Now, we hear about this normally at Christmas time. I always look at these because we talk about them on the show. There's kind of like a handful, and it's usually only a handful of cases sometimes are taken to court of children who've missed more than 26 days at school, and usually to the extreme. But this is certainly to the extreme, isn't it?
So this is another person in Cork who acknowledged an important anniversary some days ago. It's an article by Caroline Delaney that I'm so glad made the front of the Irish Examiner in recent days. So let me tell you the story of a 10-year-old girl named Leah Ford, who has missed 100 days of school since being sent home last October. By no fault of her own, by the way, or the school's fault. She's not able to walk or talk and is fed on a special blended diet using a tube into her stomach. So it's this diet and feeding procedure that has led to the school setback, you might call it, for her. And she'd been attending St. Paul's Special School in Montenotte and loved it. But the tube feeding takes 20 minutes a day, and the school nurse can't be committed to the specific time required. 3 times each day she needs it. They just have to be available to tend to the 90 plus other children with special needs in the school. Now, this Leah has suffered so much. She's had health issues such as scoliosis and a lot of infections. And the principal, Anne Hartnett, is fighting tooth and nail for her, as is her mother, our mother and father, Michelle and Declan. So Anne Hartnett has been principal of St. Paul's since 2014, and she's worked in the special education sector since 1994. And she's very brave to speak out, and because she says she's been swamped by bureaucracy in trying to resolve this issue. So she told the Irish Examiner, "It broke our hearts to have to send Leah home. It's an issue that would affect so few children, so it would be cheap to solve." But nonetheless, she's contacted the Minister of State for Special Education Inclusion, Josepha Madigan, the Department of Health and the Department of Education, the National Council for Special Education. I'm sure the list goes on, but they all seem to be passing the buck to each other, basically, and saying it's someone else's responsibility.
Well, that's what they always do, isn't it? Yeah, it always is somebody else's responsibility, particularly when you've got a vulnerable child at the end of it.
Yeah, and the thing about this is it's not the academic element that's really, really important for Leah. They're hoping that she'll eventually be able to communicate, and maybe with the help of eye gaze technology that she'll be able to answer yes or no to questions, or she'll be able to tell them where a certain pain is, or even say, express her love for her mum and dad. And of course now she's been left in limbo. I mean, they talk about children being equal in the eyes of the Constitution, and this is very jarring, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And I'm also looking at a story, when I look at these kind of heartfelt stories, a blind artist who became a fugitive looked death in the eye and eventually found himself lecturing in Cork, and he's overcome this and organised an exhibition of his own artwork.
Yeah, this is an amazing story. So before I go into the very interesting apartheid stuff, let me tell you that Robert Faree, who lives in Cork City, suffers from retinitis pigmentosa, which resulted in him gradually losing his eyesight over time. Rather than give up on his painting passion, however, he developed a love for electronic art. And his upcoming exhibition is taking place in the Key Co-op on Tuesday, May 9th, at 7 p.m.
Is he, by the way, is he completely blind or is he partially sighted?
He's 95%. So
because I often wonder, I heard of a blind artist before, and I often wonder, and I don't mean to be flippant, but I often wonder, do they appreciate their own art then? Because obviously they can still draw, and particularly with electronics nowadays, it makes it a lot easier because of the accessibility options for, online. But in saying that, can they appreciate their own work if they can't actually see it? I find that bizarre, and I find it's just incredible.
Yeah, and this Robert is just incredible in every way. I think he really enjoys the process, and he enjoys what it brings to other people, and I think he likes being a role model to other people. So I think that's where his enjoyment is. But the pieces are almost as colourful as his own life experiences, which he explained to me has been eventful, to say the least. Now, Robert enrolled in university in South Africa, where he hails from originally. So that was after he realised he wasn't suited to religious life, because he actually trained to become a priest. So at that time, he received a call from the South African Defence Force demanding that he travel to Pretoria to report for duty as a soldier. So he phoned them and explained that he was studying. He thought it would be okay, but they told him, no, this is something you have to do. And he did something that was absolutely unthinkable back then. He tore up the call papers, as well as the train ticket they had sent him and the meal ticket and all that. And he just said, I'm not going. He said, I have black friends who I grew up with. This isn't something I'm going to be doing. So he was conscientized as such by his exposure to black people in the poor townships during his religious life, and he understood the evil of apartheid. And from that day on, he was a fugitive. And you would think that if you being a fugitive, that you would lie low, wouldn't you?
You would imagine so, yes. You wouldn't draw attention to yourself.
Yeah, he just continued to attend a university as normal, thinking, well, I'm just hidden in plain sight, thinking, well, they're not going to look for me here. They're not going to think I'm still here.
They won't think I'm the same chap.
Yeah, but not only that, he continued to campaign and joined anti-apartheid movement. So he has about 9 lives, this fella, because he said at one stage, I thank God for small mercies when I look back at one incident in particular. So a group of them went to an anti-apartheid rally outside a church, and people were singing freedom songs, and it was all very peaceful. Then his friend Celeste complained of pains in her legs, and they went home. What he didn't realise was that if he had stayed just 8 minutes longer, he would have been arrested and thrown into jail for being a fugitive. So the images in the newspapers the next day were of police breaking up the crowds. They came in with whips, sprayed tear gas, beat people up, and they sprayed protesters with this water cannon containing dye, so everyone could be clearly identified, and there was basically no getting away from it.
I've heard of them doing that before, using the dye. So they do it now in America, I think, don't they, for some of the riots that happen over there, so they can identify people afterwards. So how is he now? Is he okay now?
Oh, he's doing so well, and
good.
Do you know what? He's such a lovely character, and I'm going to be going along to the exhibition, and I'm so looking forward to his exhibition.
You have a great social life, Sarah. You're heading off everywhere, bringing children with you and all sorts of things. Anyway, look, echoes of the past in the Echo newspaper, because they report an incident that happened 100 years ago today, to the day, that saw a housekeeper of a priest kidnapped in plain sight in bizarre circumstances. Now, maybe you should explain this one.
Okay, so usually referring to an old story, or usually referring to a story as old news is the biggest insult you can dish out to a reporter. However, in the Echo, we love old news. So the story we published on Friday was 100 years old, and it happened in 1923. So as described in the Echo at the time, there was a sensational occurrence reported from Clodugh, Crookstown, County Cork. At about 7 p.m. on Tuesday, 2 men entered the residence of Father Murphy and proceeded directly to the kitchen. There they found the priest housekeeper, Anne White, a woman of advanced years. She was ordered out at the point of a revolver and brought in a car to an unoccupied house 5 or 6 miles away. So what do you think they did to her there? Did you think they...
Well, no, what I'm more... actually, Sarah, what's caught me off guard here and I'm more surprised about is you said in a car. I'm thinking 100 years ago. How many people actually had a car 100 years ago? I mean, we've got to remember, this is 1923. So, I mean, that would have been unusual. But tell me what happened anyway, yeah.
They gave her a haircut. They cut her hair. They cut her hair off. It's really strange. So she was being detained for a while, and then she was set free.
And why did they cut her hair? Was it some sort of ceremony, some sort of cultural thing or religious thing? Or
No, they weren't very cultural at all. So I think the reason was So I think she was said to be, like the reasons for the outrage weren't fully clear, but it's suggested that she gave information to Canon Tracy.
Okay.
It's Canon Tracy on the time on the movements of the irregulars.
Right. Oh, so, okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I reckon they might have cut her hair and said, "Okay, that'll teach you. You won't be able to leave the house now."
You'll be too embarrassed with your short hair to leave the house.
Too embarrassed with your short hair. Exactly. That was enough to do it back then. You know.
I'm still going back to them having a car in 1923. By the way, can I just point out, because that would have been the rarest thing ever. I mean, there wouldn't have been that many cars around in 1923, would there? I wouldn't imagine so.
Well, I don't think I'd like to take a spin in a car under those circumstances. Anyway, I'm sure otherwise it would have been very exciting.
I think you kind of stand out a mile if you had a car in 1923. I think you must be rich. Anyway, apart from kidnapping housekeepers. Well, listen, Sarah, it was lovely talking to you. And by the way, I know we had a little chat before we come on, and I know you were feeling unwell, and I hope you're feeling better.
Are you going to tell everyone?
No, Sarah. We agreed that we wouldn't tell everybody that you had food poisoning. So, but I hope you do feel better, and you need to stay away from those salads. That's all I say.
Now the world can take pity on me. Yeah,
absolutely. Sarah, lovely talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Show.